And we're here with Shiraz Shizi Akhtar. I don't really need to introduce him, but I'm going to do it anyway. He's the king of Pakistani Dota. He's one of the few players in modern Dota 2 who's been offered a slot in a team abroad. He went to Power Gaming to play in Malaysia for quite a long time and learned a lot over here. We're here to talk to him about his experiences then, earlier in the Pakistani days, and now moving forward into the future. Shiraz, how are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I mean, it's always fun to have someone like you to be interviewed. I don't think we've ever actually done this before. I tried to get one with you last year, but it never worked out.
Yeah, I remember it was at Eclipse and our schedules didn't match and you had to leave early or something like that.
Unfortunately, I think my throat gave out.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah, bad days. But you know what? Elsewhere, bad and somewhat good days as well. It really depends on what perspective you look at them from. The PK Dota days. And I want you to tell me a little bit about what it was like for you back then playing in the inaugural, because back then you were an average player at best. So what was it like for you playing then? What was the tournament like? I don't even remember the format, honestly, because it just seemed to be so confused back in the day when it came down to everything.
Yeah, back then I was about like 3K more back then and I was more focused on my studies and my job and I really didn't know about, the brackets or about the tournaments or anything. I just used to play with a friendly stack. They used to be like my brothers and I actually had a brother on my team as well back then, my elder brother. So I don't even remember those days honestly. I have no idea how the brackets were. I have no idea how much we won, how much we lost. I do remember we were bad and we lost a lot, but that's pretty much it. I don't recall anything else.
It's okay. I think you've made quite a few people out there, myself included, very proud when you said that you were a 3K player. You were one of us, yeah,
Yeah.
back then. I mean, everyone came from humble beginnings. But so, you mentioned your brothers. This is something I didn't actually know about. What was your brother's nick back then?
His nick has been changing a lot, but it's mostly Pentagram for now.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, and he used to play Dota 1 a lot,
okay.
but now he's moved on to, the
Bigger and
social
better
life. Yeah,
things.
bigger and better things,
Uh,
job and the social life
the
and
real
everything.
life.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's terrible. You lose a lot of Dota players to that.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. When will they learn? When will they learn? But there were three teams who did eventually learn, but back then definitely didn't. And those three teams were the big boys. I mean, they were Lunatic, Caesar and Incognito. And it was really fun for me personally back then because there was such a trifecta of teams, etc. Were there any players who you looked up to then? Was there any team in particular that you admired? Was there any team that you thought, maybe it would be fun playing for them?
Back in the days, I remember the player that I really looked up to was Sumail. So I really didn't look up to a lot of people or any players. The ones that I looked up to, they just faded away. Anthrax faded away, and Sumail, he just grew too big.
Faded out.
Yeah,
Faded out. What
yeah,
can you do? Unfortunately, he's the one that got away for Pakistan.
yeah.
But I mean, there is one player in particular who's still around and very close to you, actually. So back in Lunatic, Titan used to be one of their star players. And back then, I don't know if the people watching this were here back then, but he was one of the most toxic players in the community. And there was a absolute legend about him not being able to play with anyone outside of the people inside Lunatic. And the only reason why people said he could play in Lunatic was because everyone else was toxic too. And that's apparently how it worked with him. But now when I met him, he seems to be so absolutely fantastic. What's it been like, and how has your perception changed of Titan over the years, and what's he like as a player in your team now?
Back in the days, I didn't know Titan as much personally, but when we like went to Malaysia, I think we learned a lot. Like how much it impacts, like how much of your social interaction impacts on the game, like outside the game, your social interaction outside the game, your mindset and everything. So I think we learned a lot in Malaysia, and that's what actually helped him out of that toxic stage. But I
Hmm.
personally have never seen him being toxic with me, or actually just I've never seen him being toxic randomly.
Okay.
But you never know.
You never know.
It's
I mean,
Pakistan, yeah.
With Dota players in general,
Yeah,
you never know.
you
Even the
never know.
best of them can be the worst of us
Yeah.
sometimes. No, but so was there a bit of a bonding experience back then? Because I actually completely forgot that you two played in a team together in Power Gaming. I knew that Titan went, but for some reason I thought that you went at different times. What was it like moving with him to a different country? Was there a lot of isolation for you two? Was it just like you had to rely on him as well as him having to rely on you, things like that?
Yeah, definitely. There were like we used to rely on each other in everything, be it the game, be it financial issues, be it like everything, because we didn't have anyone else over there. We're just
Mm.
alone over there, and it was our first time. We had no preparations, we had no idea, we just like went in randomly. And he did help me out a lot, and that's why we have a strong bonding in our current team as well.
Okay. Was he there before you?
No, we went together.
Okay, fair enough. So, speaking of bonds, you had a mixed stats, as you mentioned earlier. There were a lot of players you played with. You played with Rush, you played with Juked, a couple of other players here and there as well. Of
Yeah.
course, some of them more infamous than others. But there were three players who I remember were always there. They were a staple of Team Envy. They were the players who basically um, created the foundation of and the bedrock for you to become the best in Pakistan. And those were Convict, yourself, and Coldfire. Now, Coldfire was very respected as a player. He was one of the first Pakistanis inside Pakistan, so that discounts Sumel, who reached 6K MMR. And that was a huge deal back then. He was one of the best offlaners, one of the smartest players I've personally ever seen. But there was also Convict. And Convict was your team captain, please correct me if I'm wrong. And he was apparently the one behind a lot of the drafting or the shot calling. And sometimes, very often, people said that his skill wasn't up to the mark and he really wasn't at a point where perhaps he was fit to be leading a team that even underneath NB, you guys became the best in late 2016, early 2017, if I'm not wrong. Do you think there's any truth to that? Do you think that Convict perhaps did start to fall off a little bit? What was his play style like? How did he play? Was it outdated?
I do think there's a bit of truth in that, and I think that goes for every captain, probably every captain in the world right now. When you're a captain of a team, you don't really have to rely on your personal individual skill. You have to be focused more on the draft and leading the team. And Coldfire, what can I say about him, man?
Oh,
Like
what a player.
amazing. Like he was an amazing player. He was an amazing friend, and like everything about him was great. It's so unfortunate that he actually quit playing Dota. He doesn't take Dota seriously anymore. That's pretty
Mm.
unfortunate for us. But yeah, so about Convict, I think that's how a captain has to be. He doesn't need to be individually skilled the way I like captains, as they need to be more focused on the drafts and their players, and they have to be like a semi coach or something for the players. So I think he did have a pretty great impact, as equal as mine or Coalfire, for our success in enemy.
Okay, so that's interesting because a lot of people, even as far as captaincy went, sometimes doubted him. But I think if you're saying that he was equally critical in his success, then he must have been. And since you mentioned he was like half a coach, something that I've noticed recently is that basically most lands that you go to, a lot of them Convict attends as well. So is Convict still to some extent trying to help you guys out in some way, like strategically, coaching wise? Is he still involved, or is it just like a very close friendship that
No,
you two have?
he's a really close friend. He's like a big brother to me. So he helps me out in like almost everything. Wherever I need help, he's always there. So that's why he's attending all these events. And if it matches his schedule, he's always there. There's not something with the team, but he does have a certain bond with me.
Does he have you ever considered having him on board as a coach? And I don't mean as a strategic coach because obviously he doesn't play Dota to the same extent anymore. But I mean more of a man management coach who can try and manage relationships in the team, something like that. Do you think there's any merit to that?
Definitely, if he starts playing Dota the way he used to, and he would get like somewhat relevant in the scene again, there's obviously and definitely a place for him in our team. Definitely.
Hmm. Okay, so again, winding back the clock a little bit more. When I first got into Pakistani Dota and I somewhat shifted away from international, I noticed that there was this really big old boys club, and a lot of the times it was like, अच्छा यार मैं डोटा 1 खेलता था मैं जी एरिना में ये था मैं जी एरिना में वो था you who are you know you're just a Dota 2 player, and because back then there was no MMR, so you couldn't really quantify how good you are. And because of that, a lot of the times these bigger teams like Caesar and Incognito and Lunatic, like I mentioned earlier, to some extent CSM as well, these bigger teams, they really just held the same core Dota 1 players, and they weren't really very receptive to people from the outside. And you obviously were a Dota 2 player, if I'm not wrong. Was the experience similar for you, or was this just something that I observed?
It was similar in the start, because I didn't when I started, the MMR thing did come into play. So I didn't have a lot of MMR back then. Incognito, Lunatic, and Ceci did. We never like got along. I could never get into any of these teams. just because I had low MMR, and deep inside I did know that the only reason that I'm on a lower MMR is because I'm focusing on my part-time job and on my studies. So I actually did end all of this. What can you say? मैं Dota 1 का green का player and everything. I did prove it to the scene, and now everything is pretty structured. Everything is related to MMR and it's related to skill. There's no more, मैं तेरे से बड़ा हूँ और मैं Dota 1 खेलता रहा हूँ. It's all gone.
Let's be a little bit realistic. There were things at play other than your MMR back then, which was why they didn't like you.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
talk a bit about yourself back then as a person?
Back then, I used to be toxic to some players because I used to think the VIP culture for these three teams, Incognito, uh, Lunatic, and Cecil, they used to get a lot of VIP culture. So I thought that if you're really good, you can do whatever the hell you want because like you're like a VIP. So I used to treat my teammates and anyone who was around me, really anyone who was that I knew about was not as good as me or had lower MMR than me. I would just treat him like really awful, like garbage or something. But it did change when I went to Malaysia. I learned a lot, and I think I've improved in that department.
And I think we're all for the better of it. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
might not have been sitting here with me. Right, but so the Dota 1 culture, the not exactly the VIP culture, but the G Arena, we play together in Dota 1, we're so good. We're not going to let anyone new into our team, even if their MMR is like decent. 4K back then was considered decent, surprisingly enough. 4K was considered decent. And even then, we're not going to let you into our team. Do you think that harmed the Dota community?
I definitely did, and that's what I worked on myself. I've personally been looking on to a lot of players that have high MMR and have a nice personality. You could look at Ibad, you could look at Arrow, you could look at Joker, KSG. Like there's a lot of people that just came on to teams into merit. There was no friendship, there was no brotherhood, there was nothing like that. It was just all about MMR and their skill, and completely all based on merit.
Hmm.
So yeah, back then it was hurting the scene. I think things are better now.
So, like you mentioned now, so things are obviously better. Do you think it will continue to progress in the way that in other teams as well we see this change? Because sure, you guys are picking up Ibad, you guys are picking up Joker, you guys were the ones who picked up KSG, and you guys are the ones who are really proving to the world that okay, these players are fantastic. Even if for some reason we end up not playing with them, you need to give them a shot because they are just that good. But maybe a lot of other teams are still trying to recycle old talent. So, for example, I've seen the same few people again and again in the same teams. Is it just your team? Is it because you guys because of your experience in Malaysia? Is there anything else to it, or do you think that there is a bit of a limited talent pool, and you guys being the best just managed to be like, oh, some of that, please?
No, I think teams have started to pick it up. They're starting to let go of their egos. Some of them don't, and you don't see them on the top. The ones that stay in their ego zone or their friend zone or whatever it is. You could see Aion playing with Ghost Khan. You can I never thought I would see that, and you're seeing it right now. And you can see Revenge play with Hawkeye. Like there's a lot of collaborations now, and people have started to take this professionally rather than a fun thing to do. So if you're taking it professionally, you need to play with the best to make more money, more fame, more glory to your country, to yourself. So I think it's gradually starting to get better.
Eon and Ghost Khan, man. It's absurd to even think that. A couple
Yeah.
of years ago, if you told me, I would have said you're crazy. But despite all of that, and despite all these teams changing their cultures, becoming more professional, becoming better, there's still only one dominant team, and that's you guys with xavius. Why?
No, we're not in Xemius anymore. We left Xemius Pro.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, of course, I completely forgot. Actually, on that note, what was up with that? Because to me, it just seemed a little bit odd. You guys were having so much success with them, and there was such a big organization as well. I mean, they had Pakistan's best League of Legends team. They had the best Dota team. They had another Dota team as well, and they had rosters everywhere. They seemed to be one of the biggest organizations that entered Pakistan in a while.
Right. So we were seeing a lot of success with them. They were nice to us to some extent. It was like a family, but in the professional area, they weren't as good. Be it the visas, be it arranging a boot camp, even if we had the resources for a boot camp, there would be something that would go down into flames, right? Just because of non-professionalism. The reason that it all went down to flames was because personally, I thought that if we qualify for the next WSG that's happening soon, I don't think we could have secured a visa with the xavius, because recently they did manage to screw up a football player's visa as well. So I just thought that it's not going to be a safe option to be with them. So that's why we just let it go down all in flames. And to my knowledge, all the teams, the best LOL team that you just
Yes.
mentioned, and the football player and all of that, they're all gone, probably because of this.
It's a shame, but hopefully they stick around and we can see them maybe learning from their mistakes or doing something else. Because it's always good to have more organizations. I
Definitely.
mean, it's good to have more place for players to grow, and that's definitely something that they try to do with their secondary squads as well. And that's we have to commend them for that, even if there are things which are lacking, as you said. But going back to the question, so there's still only one dominant team, and that's you guys.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's so many players and teams who are becoming more professional, who are doing so much they can. What is it that makes you guys so different?
I probably think we've got more experience on us. Me and Titan, we've learned things that the average Pakistani doesn't know about. And the good thing about us and our team is that we shared with our other teammates. If you look at our progress, we've picked up players that weren't like even relevant in the scene, and they grow so fast just because of the knowledge and the information that we have. You can look at Arrow. You should just look at his games in China that he played. He was like playing like a monster. He was amazing. You can look at Abad, Joker's actually self-made.
Joker's
Props.
crazy.
Yeah, props to that guy. But KSG improved so much. So yeah, we've got this experience from Malaysia, me and Titan, that it just grows on to the younger people. That's why we're looking for younger people. Ibad's pretty young, Arrow's pretty young. So that's how we're the most dominant team in the scene.
Joker's crazy though. I mean, what does it feel like to be playing with a player who, as a support player, managed to make it to, if I'm not wrong, it was about top 200 in Southeast Asia from
He
Pakistan?
managed to get about to like top 70.
Wow. What's it like playing with him? Because, like you said, he, if I'm not wrong, before Ximius Blue, which was about 6 months ago, he's never been in a big team. He's never been in a significant team. What's it like?
It's amazing. Like Pakistan lacks a lot of support players, right?
Yeah.
Decent, committed support players. We're
Mhm.
playing with him, me at the mid lane. It feels like I'm a king. I don't even have to tell him anything. He does everything on his own. In the previous teams, even in Malaysia, I had to tell my supports what to do, what I need. It's like he reads my movements. He knows what I want. He knows everything that's happening in the game, and he knows what his mid laner needs. So it's amazing to play with him. I've never seen support players like that in Pakistan. It's always been a lack of support in this country, and he just fills that lack for us.
Joker's a mind reader, folks. You heard it here first. But you know what? It makes me a little bit sad to talk about right now, where you guys are obviously the best. You guys are the big bad wolf, and everyone else is the three little piggies who are trying to find a house to hide in. In an interview back in 2017, you said that the one that you loved playing against the most was Caesar, and that was famously Aeon's team. Why was it Caesar? Why wasn't it Lunatic or Incognito? Because Incognito, without a doubt, had more structure, and Lunatic, without a doubt, had more consistency. Caesar were what was up with them?
Back then, I had a bit of beef with Aion, but that was we had a beef outside the game as well, but that faded away pretty quickly, and it just stayed inside the game. Apart from that, I feel like Aion was the only player who was individually skilled enough to actually give me a tough time at the mid lane, and which he did for I think a couple of years actually, where I would just get like stomped at mid. So it felt great. I was always learning from him. This is the field that I used to get playing versus Sumail or Anthrax. So, uh, just playing versus him, it improved me a lot. And in some time, I did overcome it. And that's why I really wanted to play versus them. Comparing it to Incognito or Lunatic, I never really felt like there was anyone who was as individually skilled as Aeon was back then. So it never really surprised me or hyped me up to play versus them. Versus Ceci, it was always I was pretty hyped up.
Okay.
I always knew I was going to learn something.
A little while later on, there was this team that came about, and I don't know if you'd remember these guys, but it was a squad which was made by Teltris. And he's a player whose name doesn't really come into contention for the best Pakistani players of all time. But for a while, the Underdogs, which was their team, it was beating Envy pretty consistently. And this was when Caesar wasn't really playing. Lunatic was kind of in disarray. Incognito as well had stopped playing. And Underdog suddenly came out, and no one really knew how good they were. But somehow or the other, they seemed to be beating you guys consistently. Do you remember anything about that team?
I have no idea actually. If you could remind me of the
Well, there was
roster.
Teltris, there was Barca in there. I think for a while Titan might have been in the roster for a couple of days here and there, and then there was these two relatively new players whose names they leave my mind.
I actually have no idea. And speaking about that Bursa guy, I remember he used to play from Australia or something.
From somewhere in
Yeah, I
Singapore,
remember
yeah.
losing to him in tournaments, but I have like no idea of any team called Underdogs. But I do remember losing to Bursa, so that's probably gonna be that.
Hmm.
But there's no me recalling of any Underdogs.
Okay, no, of course they were only around for a couple of months here and there, but so you talked about it. Aion was this player who was talismanic. He was this player who felt like it was Anthrax or Somel or one of these people. But even after you somewhat overcame him, even to this date, he is the only player who manages to consistently make a team with seemingly relatively random people come to NASCON and somehow beat you in at least one match. What is there about Aeon when even after you are without a doubt more individually skilled than him, what is it about him that manages to let him do that with a different roster every time?
I personally think he's the only person in Pakistan right now who actually has the confidence to, play versus us. Because at some point he has beaten us, and he's beaten us really bad. The teams right now in Pakistan, they're all new. So I'm pretty sure they're choked or, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure Ayon has the confidence in himself, and he boosts the team that he's playing with. So they do manage to take a game off of us. But the game that we lost in NASCON, we were having team conflicts, so that's why we lost. And we overcame that in the grand finals.
Were those team conflicts anything to do with why Ghost Khan and KSU ended up leaving soon after?
Not exactly, but it did help us come up to a conclusion. To what I recall is things were getting pretty hard to us after what happened in China. We didn't get the visas, and we did face a lot of losses after that as well in TLG and NASCON. So we were looking for a conclusion, and it helped us come up to a conclusion, and they just parted their ways.
Well, I mean, I think we may potentially end up with two good teams off the back of that, and hopefully they can redistribute some of the knowledge that they got playing with you guys as well. And likewise, the way you've managed to groom Ibad and Joker, to some extent, Joker, of course, he's much more complete anyway. But hopefully they can manage to do that with a couple of new players in another team as well. You mentioned earlier on in the other small interview that Danger is a player that you think would be a little bit similar to Aeon. I'll be honest, I've barely heard of him. Is there a reason for that? And is there a reason why you think he could be, pardon the pun, as dangerous as Aeon?
I think people don't know much about Danger because he likes to stay low key. After, if you haven't heard of it, he mentored Sumel to win a
Oh,
TI. Yeah, he used to mentor Sumel, and he likes to stay low key after that because he started getting a lot of negative attention. Because you see, if you mentor somebody for a TI and you still get nothing out of it, it's not a good thing, to put out there. He's staying low key for the while. So I think I've played with him for about like 6 months, and in these 6 months, I realized that he's the only person in Pakistan that I actually learned something from. I see other players play. I see they're good. I see they're talented. I see they have quick hands. I see they have good reflexes. But Danger has this knowledge about Dota that you know you could compare that to TI winners or TI players. He's got knowledge that is actually insane, and he's so committed to the game. He's probably playing Dota for like so long now, and if you see his passion, it's just like a passion of like a 12-year-old who's just started playing Dota, and like that craze in you.
yeah, of
I'm in a rose
course.
game खेलनी है, I want to play it for 16
When you actually
hours.
like it.
Yeah. So you can see that in Danger. So that's why I feel like he's somebody who could lead a team to the top. I don't think he's in the age right now to actually carry a team or carry somebody with his individual skill anymore, but he can definitely lead a team to the top.
What role
Probably
does he play?
he plays carry.
He goes carry.
He used
Okay.
to play mid. He plays carry now, and he's switching on and off. Sometimes he plays fifth, sometimes he plays fourth.
Would be interesting to see him playing a support role. That could be a very good captain if what you're saying is correct.
Yeah,
Well, something to look forward to.
definitely.
But there wasn't a lot to look forward to for you back in 2017. And again, I'm going to refer to the same interview. You said that when asked about what you like about gaming in Pakistan, you said nothing. There's nothing to like. Things have changed now, which is something you very quickly discussed and mentioned earlier on. Do you want to go into a bit more detail about what's changed and how it's better?
The perspective of the sponsors, when I was playing in Envy back then, I came back from power gaming into Pakistan, and I thought, things might have changed in 6 months, because you see 3 players from Pakistan, they're going to Malaysia. So this is like a huge opening. And when I came back, it was all the same. The organizers, they're still the same. The players, they're still the same. Everything was just the same. But now you see GameBird coming in. There's so many sponsors coming in. I'd like to talk about my current sponsor, Prometheus Gaming. Just their approach, they want to offer salaries, they want to offer boot camps, they want to offer, just everything to a player that he desires, that he needs to perform. Back then, these things weren't there. It's growing, so I hope it keeps growing and we get onto the international stage as well.
So I'm sorry, you're with Prometheus, you said?
Prometheus, yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about them? Because this is, if I'm not wrong, this is something that at the time of recording this interview hasn't been discussed yet in the public.
Yeah, it's a Karachi-based organization that we signed up with after xavius, and we're looking forward to going into the boot camp for now. And the things that they're providing us, contract flexibility, gears, boot camp, it just seems really nice. But we're still looking forward to actually seeing all this happen. Even though it sounds really good on black and white, we're still looking forward to see what actually happens when we reach Karachi.
Well, hopefully it isn't another power gaming.
I hope so.
Like you mentioned, we have different organizers now. That's great. So we've got GameBird this year, and GameBird's done a lot. And GameBird, realistically speaking, means that we've got a very big corporation trying to get into esports that wants to bring it up. But the problem with big corporations sometimes is that they've got a little bit of a disconnect with the small community. We're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. But still, we want as much feedback from players as we can get. What do you think you would like to see from us at GameBird to make the Pakistani stage better, so that the next time someone asks you in an interview what is good about Pakistani gaming, you can give them a list of things that have managed to be accomplished?
Can you repeat that question?
What do you think GameBird needs to do better so that Pakistani gaming becomes good? So that next time, if anyone asks you what's good about Pakistani gaming, you have a lot of things to talk about.
I think they need to start supporting teams. They need to start sponsoring teams, and they need to make an impact on the international stage. Currently, I think they've made an impact on the national scene, and they need to make an impact on the international stage. Because if you look at how things got better for Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, all of these countries, they had players performing at TI or something that actually made the scene more relevant, and it made players actually look up to them and just wanted to be like them. Eventually, just making up a whole structure, everyone wanted to play, everyone wanted to get better. So I think focusing more on the international stage and helping teams out more, and just keeping up with these events, and hopefully with a better prize pool, because better prize pool attracts more people. It lets the parents and the families give more allowance to their children. So it helps out. It helps us a lot.
Well, hopefully that'll be something to keep in mind for the schedule moving into next year, and possibly even this year. Who knows? I mean, fingers crossed. So Philippines, Singapore, those are places which have comparatively much more thriving scenes than we do right now. I know from talking to you personally that you've gotten offers from other places, even after power gaming. I know there's been places in India, there's been places in Singapore, there's been places everywhere. There's a lot of market for you. But you haven't left. And you said that you think you can accomplish something from Pakistan. How good of an offer would it have to be for you to say, okay, I'm joining them? And can you give me like some example of a team?
There's no team that I actually have in mind right now, but the offer has to be somewhat relevant to a tier one team, because my main goal is to play a TI. I'm not looking for, these small events, because if I've committed my life towards esports, it has to end on winning a TI or at least playing a TI. So the reason I'm not actually joining another team, I don't want to join another power gaming. I don't want to get into a contract that's not flexible. I don't want to get into a place there's no going back until the organization is okay with it. So I'm looking for flexibility, and I'm looking for a team that would actually be relevant enough to compare play versus tier one teams. So until then, I'm actually helping my team out. I'm leading them to that stage. So let's see what happens if I stick here or if I get a relevant offer from somewhere else.
So would you say that people in the tier one scene know of you? Because obviously, in the tier two, tier three scene, a lot of people know of you. But were there people who, for example, after you guys qualified for WSG and you guys did play in China once, after that, were there people who were like, oh, look at that player, and just generally got in touch with you just to talk to you, something like that? Do you think that the tier one players are aware of you?
I think the tier one players are aware of me. Definitely in the Southeast Asian scene, I play with all of them almost all the time in my pubs, and I did get approached by some of them. Can't name any of them, but most of them are TI players. So yeah, they're pretty aware of me. But the offers that I get, they're not up to the mark. It seems like another power gaming. It seems like another, um, going into a place where you can't say no. I'm pretty hesitant about these kind of offers.
Completely understandable, of course. But I mean, there has to be something good about playing with Pakistanis as well, because the cultural cohesion, etc. That's actually something we don't see that often in Dota, because in Dota, a lot of times the international teams from different nationalities have been the norm. But for example, in a game like Counter-Strike, where historically players have always played with one nationality, so that's something that's been an advantage to them when it comes to communication. Is that something you feel like you have with the five Pakistani roster as well, or do you think Dota is just a very different game where it doesn't matter as much?
Definitely. When I was playing in Malaysia, we did have a lot of communication issues, like huge communication issues. I'll give you an example. I remember I used to tell my teammates that we can't go, we can't go into this team fight, or we can't go for Roshan. And because probably my accent or probably their understanding, I don't know, but they used to think I'm saying we can go, and they would go in, and it was just a massacre. Actually, we would just lose easy games like that.
Oh, that
Three
sounds
people are
awful.
going in. Actually, two. We had two Malaysians. Two Malaysians would go in, and three of us Pakistanis who actually understood me, they wouldn't go in. There were a lot of communication issues, and I don't feel it with my Pakistani boys here.
No, no, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But with Pakistani boys, one big advantage you have is the amount of open qualifiers that have started to pop up. And this is something that wasn't there before. So before the DPC system, you barely ever had open qualifiers, before the majors especially, because at least the majors gave, one qualifier every 3 months. But before the majors, there was the Corsair Cup for Southeast Asia, and then there was the Gigabyte Cup for Europe. And beyond that, everything was all right. You have to be invited or you have to play up in the joint DOTA league. So with the advent of DPC, where there's so many open tournaments for you guys to play at, how has that changed your perspective of playing from Pakistan?
I think it's actually huge. It's like because every team's main goal is to play in a TI or in a major, or minimum a minor. So what actually happens is that these teams, the big teams, the big boys, the big guns, they're playing minors, majors, or other qualifiers. And while we're playing in other events for DPC points, it helps us grow, right? Because if you're never going to play versus a tier 1 team, how are you going to improve? I think the structure now is actually much better if we keep on, growing from one event to the other. We keep on going, even though if we're losing from a tier one or tier two team, we're still gonna improve. Back then, when we qualified for Corsair, like it was like we were playing versus tier three teams, and we qualified, and we're playing versus a tier one team right away, and we just got stomped, and we're out of the tournament. We learned nothing, and there was a huge skill gap, right? We're playing versus tier three teams, and then we're playing versus a tier one team. There's no tier two team in between that we would learn from,
Mm,
because there's always a step for growth. So I
right.
think it's pretty structured now. Everything is better, and we're really looking forward to qualifying for these small events. One is happening in Australia. We're really looking forward to playing these open qualifiers.
Well, I mean, hopefully, you guys are able to make it through to close qualifiers at the very least sometime soon. I mean, we're all looking forward to that. And very quickly to add context for those of you who aren't aware, because the Corsair Cups were something that happened a long time ago. The Corsair Cups were these small $3,000 tournaments where a lot of Southeast Asian teams played, and sometimes you came up against tier one teams. And Shiraz's team back then, Envy, was able to get to the round of 16 where they went up against Mushi, who is obviously a reigning Dota legend, and ended up losing to them, as he mentioned there. But so other than DPC tournaments, there's still tournaments, and it's slightly less now, but there's still smaller tournaments that happen that are $10,000 prize pool, 15,000, something around that stage, where there's still decent teams playing. And historically, I believe it was back in the late 2016, mid 2017, that the Indian team Entity Gaming started to get invited to a couple of these. And back then, as Team Envy, you guys were around the same level as them, but you guys never really got invited to tournaments. Now, do you think that things are changing? Do you think that you guys are going to start to get invited to these smaller tournaments so you don't have to go through long qualifiers, so you can just go directly into a close qualifier or something like that?
I think back then, when we were playing with Envy, we weren't as good as Entity. There was a Signify, no, not Signify actually. What were the Indian teams back then? There was Entity, there was Beyond Infinity, there was
Beyond Infinity was a really good one.
yeah. But I remember there were two teams back then. I can't recall them. They were Indian teams, and back then we were really better than them. But things have changed because they have much better resources than we do, and they have a better structure in terms of the organization and everything over there. So they all, in most cases, they outperform us, and that what happens. That's what happens in tournaments as well. And they have a pretty good performance in the tournaments they've played. What happens is all these organizers, they only invite teams that have a relevant and a good performance in the past tournaments. So we don't really have a great showing at any international tournament apart from WSG, which went down in flames because of the visa thing. So we need to prove ourselves in a tournament. Hopefully we'll be getting invites to these tournaments.
Well, hopefully that'll be happening. But I'm slightly surprised though that WSG even getting to where you didn't really help you out. But hopefully, moving on in the future, you guys will be able to get into the smaller events pretty consistently, because that's amazing practice. And if nothing else, that's decent viewership. That's something to play with, and that's something to pitch to sponsors, especially moving forward. Like you said, there has to be some sort of international awareness, and you said that it has to be through winning a tournament or through having a good placing to be invited into one of these smaller things. But in my opinion, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, is it also to some extent a lot to do with the media related activities that teams are doing? So if a team seems to be more popular because they're doing more interviews, because they're producing more content and things like that, they're more likely to be invited to an event? Because a lot of people outside of the Pakistani scene don't know you guys. I mean, of course the professionals do, but other than that, people can't really find you streaming regularly. People can't really have anything like that. Do you think that if there was more content produced from our best teams, that would increase the chance of them being invited?
Definitely. But I still think that just based on media and content, the team will not get invites. But it does help the organizers actually, get to know you. I think if we had more media content, we would have gotten some invites for these recent events that are happening in the foreseeable future. Just because we're not out there on the market or on the media, we don't get invited as much. But I still think that it's more based on how you perform in tournaments, so they can get more viewership just based on the teams. But definitely, there's probably 25 to 30 percentage of the play of content and media coverage from teams that help them get invites.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps you get like the very last distance done and sorted out.
Yeah.
So you were obviously at our Game Bird event at Lahore. Spoilers, he won it. But what did you think about that?
I thought everything was pretty great. It was first of its kind event in Pakistan, at least. Apart from The media production, which was like awful. Actually, you were casting, you'd agree with me on that.
I don't
But
think I'm allowed to.
but yeah, so apart from that, everything went really great. We got a prize pool that was probably the biggest in Pakistan as of now. The event went out smoothly from the qualifiers to the finals. Everything was pretty great. The environment, the computers, the screens, it was on point. The managing, the venue, it was all on point. I actually loved the event, apart from the media production.
Well, I mean, glad to hear that. But if and when, because of course that's a small hiccup that it happens, and we're very mindful of a few mistakes that may have taken place. But regardless, if and when we're able to really take it to the next level when it comes to the last fine tuning, so we have spectacular streams, etc., things like that, do you think that we are at a point where we can display a level of competition or a level of entertainment that would be able to achieve that last 30% of the media presence that you talked about, so be able to attract some international eyes to our tournaments as well in Pakistan?
Definitely, I think if we put in effort, if Gamebird puts in an effort, there's definitely a huge chance of us getting, some viewership out from outside of Pakistan as well, and we will definitely be in the eyes of the international scene. There's no doubt about it. You can see India, you can see Philippines. I see even China. I see these countries. They weren't so relevant probably 5 or 10 years back from now, and they grew so fast. And I think we could grow on the same pace. All we need to do is just put in some more effort and some more time.
Well, you heard it here, folks. We're ready for going big. We just need a little bit more effort and a little bit more time. But do you think that because I personally do think so, but do you think that we're at the point where we can put up matches that are good enough in terms of the teams going against each other? Because we've still got some fantastically skilled players.
I think the players need to like actually get better, and they need to get relevant into the international scene. That means having higher MMR, playing with more professionals, so they actually want to watch them play. We're not gonna get any international viewers until these players are relevant. There's some players that are relevant. Could be Joker, me, Aion, Ghost Khan, Arrow as well now. These players, they need to be more interactive. They need to build up a personality, right?
Hmm.
People need to know them, regardless of if it's a bad image or if it's a good image. But people need to know you. That's why they're gonna watch you. Otherwise, they're not gonna watch you if they don't even know you.
All right, Shiraz, you're the bogeyman of Pakistani DotA. You're the one who everyone wants to beat, and you're the one to beat them all. You're undoubtedly the king of the national scene. And before we say goodbye and before we say thank you to you for being here, is there anything you want to shout out to? Because I know you've got some contractual obligations now as well.
I'd like to give a huge thanks to my sponsors, my family who supports my career, the people who support me in generally, and my teammates who treat me like a king when I'm playing. Thank you so much, everyone.
And thank you for being with us today, Shiraz. And remember, all hail the king.